Welcome to this relatively short video on the lymphatic system. This is one of two videos that will be included for Lab 9. So the lymphatic system, what is it doing? A couple of very important functions. Number one, it's assisting your cardiovascular system. It's helping your heart to transport fluid around your body, specifically through lymphatic vessels. This excess fluid that you find between your cells, you've seen called before the interstitial fluid. When that similar fluid is found inside your lymphatic vessels, that fluid is referred to as lymph. Now, lymph is traveling through the body in these lymphatic vessels in a unidirectional way, returning toward the heart. We'll see that in a minute. And along the way, that lymph is being filtered and checked for foreign antigens, for cancer cells, for bacteria, for viruses. The lymphatic structures contain cells that can initiate an immune response against those foreign or abnormal materials. And this is a critical component of your overall immune system. So not only are the lymphatic vessels transporting fluid, but they are also in part transporting nutrients. They are allowing for cells of the lymphatic system, lymphocytes, to develop. And that excess, that fluid that's traveling through the body and into these lymphatic vessels, if it accumulates excessively in one area of the body, you might complain about edema, swelling of that area. So if there's any blockage of lymphatic vessels, that can lead to edema. There is at any one moment about 3 liters of this fluid found between your cells. Again, if that fluid builds up and is not properly carried through the body by lymphatic vessels, you may have edema. Another really important connection to our digestive system is that your lymphatic system helps to absorb lipids from your diet. So you may recall that along the small intestine, there in the mucosal layer, right underneath all of those simple columnar epithelial cells, there was a series of capillary structures as well as green lymphatic vessels. Those small, tiny lymphatic vessels are called the lacteals, and they are actually responsible for absorbing and transporting the dietary lipids. And those dietary lipids will eventually make their way back to the bloodstream through larger lymphatic vessels that we'll look at in a moment. Also, along the way, there are lymphatic organs, and these organs are housing many of those cells, those lymphocytes, that are there to find, search out, and identify foreign antigens. So what happens when your body initiates an immune response? Basically, you know that there are antibodies. Antibodies are one important way that your body fights off infection. There are certain lymphocytes called the B lymphocytes that produce those soluble proteins called the antibodies. You saw these in blood typing. These are proteins that travel throughout the plasma, and their job is to find and to bind to, you saw that word agglutinate, and when those antibodies identify and bind to or agglutinate with foreign antigens, it sets up other cells of the immune system to come along and attack or destroy the foreign antigen directly. Now, there are other cells that can do this without antibodies, and there are also memory cells. Memory cells are really the basis behind your vaccination schedule. You get vaccinated with a foreign antigen, something that will initiate an immune response in your body, but your cells, these memory cells, remember that. So if you are ever infected with something against which you've been vaccinated, your body is already ramped up and prepared for and can better fight off that infection. So what are the major lymphatic organs? And that's really a big part of what I want you to learn here. Let's go through a couple of these. You should be able to identify these organs when you're done with this. So there is, first of all, the thymus. You saw the thymus already in the endocrine lab. It is a hormone-producing gland. It sits on the superior border of the heart, and it produces hormones, but also is vital to the maturation of your immune system. The tonsils. We'll see a picture of these in a moment. They are in the head and neck region. There are lymph nodes that are spread out throughout the body. You could see all of these green lymphatic vessels throughout this image. These are not green blood vessels. These are lymphatic vessels carrying that lymph. That lymph is traveling back toward the heart. We'll see this in a moment. And along the way, there are these lymph nodes. The lymph nodes house these lymphocytes, which again are looking for and filtering against foreign antigens. And then there is an organ that you saw briefly in the fetal pig dissection of the digestive system, the spleen. Now, the spleen has nothing to do with digestion, but it's right there along with the other abdominal organs and is typically exposed and labeled during the digestive lab dissection. Finally, along the mucous membrane of your digestive system, there are small clusters of lymphatic tissue. This is referred to as MALT. And these are just small clusters of almost like little lymph node-like structures that are seeking out and looking for foreign antigens which enter into your digestive system and make it into your intestines. So let's figure out how it is that this lymphatic fluid gets back into the circulatory system, gets back into the bloodstream. And this is a really interesting story. There are all of these lymphatic vessels are draining back, right? They're all draining back. And they are eventually going to drain back into two large lymphatic ducts. These two ducts are going to dump back into your venous circulation. The right lymphatic duct is the smaller of the two, and it is going to return lymph from the right arm, the right side of the head and neck, and the right thoracic region. And it is going to bring that lymph back into a space right at the right subclavian vein, right next to where the right internal jugular meets. Now, the left lymphatic duct does the same thing, except it actually is returning fluid from a much larger area. So it's returning from both legs, the abdominal pelvic region, the left thoracic region, and the left arm. Now, this one, because it's so much larger, is also sometimes referred to as just the thoracic duct. And it drains also on the left side, again, right where the left subclavian vein and the left internal jugular vein come together. Let's take a look at a couple other lymphatic organs. So I've already mentioned them. We'll go through these just briefly, quickly. And again, the idea is just to have you understand enough about these organs to appreciate why we're looking at them. You will likely get a more detailed look at the lymphatic and the immune response in both your physiology class and in microbiology when you learn how the body fights off viruses and bacterial infections. So let's take a look at lymphatic organs. This is going to include your lymph nodes, the spleen, and the thymus. Let's start with the thymus. Again, it's on the superior portion of the heart. It's in the mediastinum. It is relatively large in children and in infants, but as we get older, it really regresses down to and atrophies to become a very small, nearly non-functional organ. Its job is to, again, create new T cells, which are going to be a major part of your immune system. So as we get older, we'll see that the ability to make new T cells is limited, and your immune system gets less efficient because the thymus regresses and atrophies. Secondly, as you look along the lymphatic vessels, there are these little jelly bean shaped structures called the lymph nodes. And they're all over the body, but there are 3 places where they are clustered in a higher concentration, and you'll see these labeled. There are a great number of lymph nodes in the axillary region. There are quite a few in the inguinal region, and also in the cervical region. So again, they're everywhere. They're found individually, but there are these 3 clusters or these 3 groups: axillary, inguinal, and cervical. Inside those lymph nodes, there are many of those lymphocytes. And so if a lymphocyte is activated by a foreign antigen traveling through the lymph, that lymphocyte will initiate the immune response and will cause an inflammation, a great number of these cells to be replicated, to be copied. And so when there is a swollen lymph node, it's evidence that your immune system is fighting off something that has been recognized as foreign. The other thing that lymph nodes are unfortunately famous for is that many cancers metastasize, they spread. A lot of cancers spread through these lymphatic vessels, and these cancer cells will then be trapped in and identified in lymph nodes. So when someone has a biopsy, they oftentimes will not only take a look at the tumor, but they'll also take a look at the neighboring lymph nodes. If there is no evidence of those cancer cells spreading to the lymph nodes, then the cancer is assumed to have been localized to the tumor, and the tumor will be removed, and hopefully radiation and some surgical removal will be all that's necessary to rid the body of that cancer. However, if there is evidence of significant or any of those cancer cells metastasizing to the lymph nodes, then you know the cancer has spread, and now some sort of chemotherapy regimen will be included in fighting that cancer. Let me introduce the tonsils to you. You will see them again when you look at the respiratory system and you look again at the nasal and oral regions. So there are 3 main sets of tonsils. First of all, there's the pharyngeal tonsils. These are not what you normally think of. These pharyngeal tonsils are also referred to as the adenoids. And you'll see them right here, up in what's called the nasopharynx, right behind the nasal mucosa. Also back here is the opening to the pharyngeotympanic tube. Remember, that's also called the auditory tube or the eustachian tube. And this helps you explain why or how bacteria can get up into the middle ear. Remember that pharyngeotympanic tube goes up to and opens up in the middle ear around the ossicles, and that's where infection can set up for a middle ear infection. The tonsils that you normally hear about and think about are actually the palatine tonsils. They are back on the palate, on the soft palate, And looking at this picture here, here is that flap of skin that hangs down called the uvula. Let me get a different color down here in this picture. So here's the uvula. And on either side, there would normally not be much seen, but you can see there's some very inflamed structures on either side. Those are the palatine tonsils. This person is suffering from tonsillitis. And then finally, there are some lingual tonsils. We probably won't see those again in much detail, but the lingual tonsils are, as the name suggests, right up underneath at the base of the tongue. Finally, the spleen. It's the largest of the lymphatic organs. It is located in the left side of your abdominal pelvic cavity. It is inferior to the diaphragm, of course, and is posterior to ribs 9 through 11. Its job is to, as we'll see in a moment, filter your blood. So the spleen has a hilum. We'll see that word over and over and over as the semester progresses. A hilum is an area of a solid organ where blood vessels and nerves enter and into and out of that organ. So there's a limited area where vessels go into or out of the organ. And you know that the splenic artery is going to bring blood to the spleen, and the splenic vein is going to return blood from the spleen. And what the spleen is doing, it is actually filtering your blood. So whereas the lymph nodes are filtering the lymph as it passes through lymphatic vessels, the spleen is actually looking for foreign antigens found in the blood. So it is filtering your blood for those foreign things. And if the spleen becomes activated, or if the cells within the spleen become activated, then you would have splenomegaly, or an enlarged spleen. A couple other things that the spleen does is it also breaks down old red blood cells and platelets. And there are lots of phagocytic cells in the spleen, macrophages, which are breaking down those foreign antigens and phagocytosing bacteria. So it's no surprise that as we get older, our immune system becomes less efficient, and we are no longer able to do some of the things. Now, the lymphatic system usually does not lose its ability to transport the lymph, so the lymphatic vessels are usually intact with aging, although if they get blocked through injury or trauma, then there can be edema. And typically, the lymphatic system continues to absorb those dietary lipids. But overall, as we get older, the thymus is no longer able to do its job. It's no longer making new T cells. And so the only T cells that your body can produce are ones that are already made. They can replicate, right? We can copy new ones, but we can't make new ones from scratch, if you will. The ability to fight disease decreases. The ability for you to fight off those foreign antigens goes down. And as a result, we create fewer antibodies, we create fewer T cells, and the ability to fight off infection. So as we do get exposed to infection, we're more susceptible to the illness, and we stay sicker longer as a result. Finally, part of your lymphatic system's job is to fight off and find and detect aberrant cells, cancer cells. And again, as the immune system gets older, the ability of the body to fight off those cancer cells early is decreased, and so cancer rates increase with age.